Hi everyone, this is Nia and today I'll be doing a part 2 of the Q&A that no one asked for, but I realized I kind of enjoy doing these chit-chat videos as well. Even though I don't get a lot of views with these types of videos, I feel like by sharing a little bit about myself, it opens up more conversation and I also get to know a little bit about you guys as well, which is something that I really appreciate. I do want to build a supportive community for this channel, so I think that doing these kinds of videos once in a while I just chat with you guys as I paint wouldn't be such a bad idea. So I wanted to paint more Indonesian food. Today I'll be painting Sate Ayam. It looks more like Sate Babi, oops. But Sate basically means skewers, Ayam means chicken, and Babi means pig or pork. We don't really have separate words for that in Indonesian, but the pork and chicken satay are basically cooked very differently. Pork satay tend to be more on the sweeter side, whereas the chicken satay is nice and savory. Some of you guys seem to enjoy how I described the food in my last video. So Sate Ayam is usually drenched in peanut sauce and drizzled with sweet soy sauce. It's usually served with either fresh sambal or sambal ketchup, which consists of sweet soy sauce, tomatoes, green bird's eye chili, and shallots or onions. Sambal just basically means hot sauce, and it can either be bottled or homemade. A lot of people make this homemade for traditional meals, and there are just so many varieties of hot sauces that I wouldn't even be able to list them all. We're sort of like India, I think, in a sense, where we use a lot of spices, and our spices are quite similar, but we use them in different ratios. And our dishes are quite heavy as well. We always serve everything with white rice, and we must not forget the fried shallots for garnish, because that's a game changer in any meal. Even if it's only a garnish, those things I can basically eat as chips. It would leave you with very sticky oniony breath, but it's always worth it. So enough about this food, and let's get to the question. So the next question is if there are any hobbies you enjoy. I'm guessing that this is referring to something that's outside of art or painting, because I think you guys know that I enjoy painting. I basically love anything to do with food. I love eating. I love cooking and baking. If you guys didn't know yet, I do have a separate Instagram account for my cakes that I make. I like to make buttercream cakes, and I like to decorate them with floral buttercream decorations. I even made a 3D Totoro cake once, and that was really fun, but unfortunately I can't really do too much cooking or baking at the moment. I do cook most of the days, but I try to do something that is simpler and something that doesn't require me to get my hands wet constantly, because that will just trigger my skin condition, as you guys know. The next question is really cute. Do you prefer painting in summer or winter? So as you guys know, I live in Jakarta and we don't exactly have winter here, though I do prefer the cold weather. Like, I prefer cold rather than hot. But I think I much prefer to paint on a rainy day, if you can consider that as winter. I just like the sound of rain outside. I just feel like it's very cozy, and I like to put relaxing music on, which is the type of atmosphere that I try to portray in my videos. I always want to make something that is more calming instead of something that is high energy, because that is the mindset that I like to be when I'm painting. Not because I am calm in general as a person, but when I'm painting, I would like to be in that mood. The next question is written weirdly, but I'll try to read it as what I think it sounds like. Is there any art medium that you say, I'll never try this? Never! With an exclamation and a question mark. The answer is no. I would practically try everything that I can get my hands on. But if you watch my previous video, you'll know that in high school we were privileged enough to try a lot of different mediums, so we get to choose which is our favorite one. I would have to say I am so bad at textiles. Anything using fabric and a sewing machine. I'm just one of those people who I can't control a sewing machine. It's, if you can consider that as a medium, but I think it is. It is a form of art. It's so bad that in one lesson, I think I broke 2 sewing machines. I even have a sewing machine in my room, but whenever I try to use it, it always gets stuck and I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. In the end, I just get tired of it. But it doesn't mean that I hate it, and I would like to explore a little bit more about it, because I mean, I love creating in general and I would love to be able to sew. It's just that the sewing machine hates me. So yeah. Anyway, next question. How could you stay original and unique in your art? And how do you get inspired from other artists and turn them into yours? So I think this is a very interesting question and a very interesting subject. I don't think I'll answer it here, but I think if you guys are interested, I'll probably turn this into a video. I'm not sure when, but it's interesting, I think, to discuss about how you use reference images and how to maybe study different styles or artists, or maybe even color palette, which is what I like to do when I look at other people's paintings as well. So I'm sorry I can't answer this for now, but I think I'll try to make it into a video if that's something that you guys would like to see. Next question, I think is a little bit more about supplies maybe. So far I've only used water to clean my brush. Are there any special cleaners? Do you use brush soap? And the answer is I just use water, because I use watercolor and watercolor is water soluble. So far I've only used water and I don't even know if there's brush soap. It's not so easy to find supplies here in Jakarta. Everything is quite limited. We don't really have different brands coming in. So I didn't even know if the brush soap exists. Do you stretch your paper before you paint? It depends what I'm painting. If I were to paint a landscape and I would need to mask off the corners so I can create a cleaner border, then yes, I would stretch my paper using masking tape. But if not, I do mostly illustrational stuff where it doesn't really require me to have a clean border, so I don't always do it. Do you secure your paintings with fixative? This is something that I wanted to try for a while now, but I can't get my hands on it because we have limitations again where I live. But I think there are also a lot of videos on this on YouTube. I know that it's available. I've searched some and I think I would have to get it from another country to be shipped here. Next one is a whole bunch of questions. What do you do with finished paintings? Do you sell them, gift them, frame them, or just store them? Should we throw away unsuccessful pieces? Coming from a minimalist, have you ever regretted throwing unsuccessful attempts? This is a very good question because it's something that I also struggle with since space is very limited here. I like to paint on sketchbooks. I think I've mentioned this before, and the reason for that is because it's much easier to store your paintings in a sketchbook, and you can have multiples of them, and that one sketchbook would hold so many of your paintings without it taking as much space compared to if you were to paint on loose paper. I do that once in a while, but I do try to limit it. If I find paper that I like, I just turn them into sketchbooks so I can keep everything in one place. And to all of my loose paintings, I still store them because I like to keep them as portfolio pieces, so I just put them in a folder together. In terms of unsuccessful attempts, a lot of times the unsuccessful attempts are in my sketchbooks, so I just keep them. And it's okay to have unsuccessful attempts because as you keep painting, you'll also be able to see the progress of your painting. I know that this is also a bit hard to store something that you don't really like, but when everything is in a sketchbook, I wouldn't be able to really throw out the whole sketchbook just because of a few unsuccessful attempts. This is just my own take on it though, and I think it would be really interesting if other people also share, maybe in the comment section, what they do with their paintings when they're done. The next question is, do you paint daily? I've answered this in my previous video, but I'm just going to answer it again. And the answer is no, I don't paint daily because I spend more time editing, scripting, planning, and voice-overing my videos and things like that, it does take a long time to do compared to the filming and the painting itself. So I don't paint daily. However, even if I do have the time, I think I'm not that committed to paint daily. I might draw daily, like doodle daily, but to paint is, I think, a huge commitment because I tend to want to paint something that's a little bit more detailed. So I think I'll get bored if I put that much pressure on myself to paint daily. Where do you get ideas of what to paint? Well, with internet and social media these days, it's not hard to find ideas to paint because you can always get inspired by looking through the internet. I like to use good old Google and Pinterest, and sometimes on Instagram too. I like to follow a lot of food, like home cafes, Japanese home cafes to be specific. I really love their aesthetic. It's always very bright, clean, and the way they present the food, it's always very cute. It's very different to like a rustic setup of food, which I also like, but for referencing photos, I really like the Japanese aesthetic. What artists do you follow on social media and why? So I follow a lot of watercolorists and food illustrators. Most of them are food illustrators because I just really love this subject. I'll just name a few, but if you would like to check all of them, you can always go to my Instagram. I follow Lisa Zoe Art because I love how she captures light and the negative spaces that she uses to capture the light without using white gouache or too much of white gouache. Yosiara Duck is the next one. I really love how loose his paintings are. He doesn't necessarily do food illustrations only, but I always love the loose brush strokes that he has, including the colors that he uses. Always a very limited palette, but he finds a way to bring out the most out of those colors. Another one is Delgura. I think that's how you pronounce it, I'm not sure. I think she's Korean and I really like the aesthetic of her painting. It's very delicate and cutesy. And last but not least, Plate to Paper. I followed her for a long time already and I'm a big fan of her work. She creates mostly snacks and food packages and I think that that's such a cute subject to get into. I hope I can get into that one day. She doesn't really put tiny details, but she always captures everything so well. The colors and the lighting always looks great, so that's why I follow her. In terms of fine art, I don't really follow too many people, but I really like Dennis Perry fine art. He does, I wouldn't say impressionist, but I think he uses a lot of impressionist colors, which is more on the pastel, soft golden light sort of palette, and I really love seeing that. So I don't know if you've noticed from hearing me saying all this, I really look up to artists who are able to capture light. It's not too hard to paint details and things like that, but what's hard for me and what I struggle with the most is to capture the light, is to know which parts are light and which parts are dark, and to know how to put it down on paper and translate that with your paint. The concept or idea of it might sound simple, the light is coming from one side or the other side, but it's hard to choose the right colors and the right tone, whether the shadow is more on the warm side or more on the cooler side and things like that, and how to balance everything out so it looks cohesive with the whole painting. That is something that I'm not able to do, and I really look up to artists who are able to do that. Next question is, how long have you been drawing or painting? Did it come naturally? So for the first part of this question, I answered this in the previous video. I don't really remember when I started drawing and painting, and in terms of did it come naturally, I would probably have to say yes, not because I drew well straight away when I was little. If anything, compared to my friends, drawing mine were quite horrible, but I would say that I was always a visual kid. I always look at things intently, and I remember that I used to just stare into space, and my mom used to tell me off because she thinks that my brain switch off and stuff like that. But remembering it, I realized that I stare into things like curtains because I want to figure out how the folds work if I were to draw them. So I was actually breaking down shapes in my head without realizing it. And in terms of things like hand muscle, I always find it just comfortable to draw and paint. The first time I held a brush, I remember my sister saying, "I heard that you're supposed to paint it like this," but I just took the brush and I just painted as if I've been painting. I'm not sure when this was, but I remember having that conversation with her. And yeah, so I think I would consider it to be natural, but it's not something that I didn't work on. I still had to work on. Even now, I'm still always continuously learning new things. And I think that that's the key to any form of art. You improve because you are interested in the learning aspect of the subject. Even though you can be satisfied with the finished results of your painting, artists are still able to see mistakes that others might not, and that's personal for everyone, as everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. And I think this self-evaluation is more important than being natural at a certain subject. My oboe teacher used to tell me that talent can only take you so far. You need to practice to keep improving, and that's the same as painting. But this doesn't mean that I just keep mindlessly painting, but I try to be self-aware in my weaknesses as I paint so I can focus more on those areas. I know this wasn't part of the question, but hopefully this makes sense and it can help you to improve your art. Moving on to the last question, which is a very good question. What would you say are the most important things to focus on as a beginner? Maybe top 5 or so. How long until I'm not a beginner anymore? So there are a lot of things that I can cover here, but I would say in terms of drawing, try to do simple life objects with simple shapes like boxes, fruits, and learning what they would look like in different angles. And if you were to draw something that's a little bit more complex, to be able to simplify those shapes. In terms of medium, I would say in this case watercolor. It is a medium which requires a lot of control, so I would say to focus on things like brush pressure, like being able to paint thick or thin lines. Having to use the very tip of your brush, it's actually not that easy, especially when you're not used to holding your brush in a certain position and having to hold it there for a long time. Your hands can get a bit shaky, but that's something that you can actually practice to get better. And also learning about how the paint reacts in different wet or drying stages. This is very difficult, and this is something that is actually very special to watercolors. It can really make or break your painting, and it's also something that I need to improve on. I'm not the best at this. In terms of color mixing, I would probably suggest to try to paint using limited palette, ideally with just the primary colors, whether it be red, blue, yellow, or cyan, magenta, yellow, and see what you can create with that. And always start with simple paintings first so you don't get overwhelmed. And to answer how long until you're not a beginner anymore, I'd have to say that that's very personal for each person. I think that if you were able to tackle harder subjects and you feel like you understand a fair bit of the basics, then I would say you're not a beginner. Even for me, I wouldn't know what level I am specifically. It's just better to be aware of your strengths and weaknesses rather than to put a label in it. Anyway, that's all of the questions that I got, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sorry that the last one was a little bit rushed. I was kind of running out of time. But anyway, I hope you found this Q&A to be useful somehow. Thank you so much for everyone who left those questions for me to answer. Like usual, the tools and social media links will be put in the description box. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you at the next one. Bye!